What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pixelists Podcast, the podcast about all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. As always, we're your hosts. I'm Will. That's Blake. And today we're here to talk some Wizard Witch and Wild One, a little Worlds Beyond number. But before all that, my friend, it feels like forever. I mean, it's been since last year that we sat down for one of these. We've done a few little live streams, but it feels like it's been a minute since we've had a proper pod.
It's been a while since we've done a little WBN, which I feel like I feel like that acronym feels like, you know, like one of those old like the CW, like old TV stations that like had like the random one decent show on it as a kid.
Yeah.
You know? So but yeah, little Worlds Beyond, and yeah, it's been a while. I thought you were gonna say it's been a long time since we've sat down, and I was like, we did it earlier today. We did it last Friday.
For the pod, and especially Worlds Beyond. Because we are, it's fun for our Worlds Beyond fans out there. Apologies for getting this out literally the day before the new episode. It's been like we've had like a month to record this
before. I know. Well, it's been wild. You know, we've had so much we've been creating a lot of content, but also it's just, you know, the holidays, it just gets hectic. So I'll echo Will's apology, and I'll apologize for my background too. Everything, it's like become like the storage room, like the intermediary storage room for Christmas decorations.
Yep.
Like I came in and it was all just like back there, and I was like, okay, so this is happening, I guess.
Yeah. The same is true of I call it an office, but like where I have my computer and stuff set up, that's like the function of this room I'm in. So it's also just storage for all of our random stuff. Yeah. So you can't tell because of the green screen, but I'm right there with you.
Rocco.
Yeah.
Second Rocco comment today, by the
way. We're a big fan of that one. We pull that one out a lot.
I need to rewatch a little bit of that show because I feel like that would be the kind of show that would not hold up.
Really? Because I was thinking it might hold up even better because it always felt like more of an adult, like kind of cartoon.
I just don't know the style of humor. I'd have to go back and see because you know humor back then was a lot.
Right. True. We're talking about
and sexist and things like that.
Yeah, that's fair. It might be a little problematic in those regards. I don't really like. We're talking about Rocco's Modern Life, by the way, for those of you that watched that growing up. Like I remember the show. Like I remember the wallaby, the cow best friend, the turtle.
Yeah.
But that being said, like I couldn't tell you what
I got no clue.
Any episode was about.
Yeah, I remember he had the cow or the steer. And that was a joke actually in the show.
Yeah.
The steer that was his best friend. And then like the really smart
the turtle. Right.
That one. Yeah. That one. But then there was like a guy who was like an entrepreneurial smart person. But
I don't even remember that guy.
To say something a little bit dangerous, it's kind of like my wife and we rewatched Scrubs, and I was like, oh man, the show's the best. And then as I was watching it, I was kind of like, a couple of those jokes probably wouldn't land today.
Oh, I hate to hear that. I haven't watched Scrubs in a number of years.
It's probably not unlike The Office, though. I mean, you know, there's some scenes in The Office the same way where you're just like, can't make that joke.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, this is not a blanket. It's okay, but you know, a lot of the stuff is a product of its time. Like, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually how I prefer, instead of like just getting rid of content entirely. I know there's been some companies that have like put like a little disclaimer at the front to be like, hey, this was a product of its time. And you know, unless it's like egregious, then it's like probably should take that down.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, anywho, it's a new year, new us.
It is
new channel. So you feel to the channel.
Yeah. We it has, so let's see. When was the last episode of this we did?
It was a while. Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. So yeah, there was a bit of a break. But now I think we're just back. Like I don't think there's
Oh yeah. We're so back.
We're back. So sorry, I lost my complete train of thought. Oh yeah. before we, not that you were going there yet, but before we launch into our proper Worlds Beyond discussion, couple things really quick. We kind of alluded to it, but for those of you that are only tuning into us to Worlds Beyond, you may not know some of these things. Blake and I have started doing a weekly live stream every Friday. So when I said, we haven't done this in forever, but Blake said we did this literally today. He was referring to a live stream we did. I guess today's not Friday. This was a weird exception for New Year's.
Mhm.
But every Friday at 1 p.m. I always want to say 1:30 for some reason, but it's 1, right?
It's at 1.
Okay. At 1 p.m. Central
Bro, now
US time.
you're gonna set that into people's heads now. It's gonna be a thing.
I don't know why it's like ingrained
Yeah.
in my head 1:30 for some reason.
Yeah. Stop saying it.
I know.
Please.
Okay. 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock Central Time US. We have started to do a live stream every Friday. It's typically just like a quick, in and out 30 minutes. Really we just talk about whatever, but it's kind of centered around D&D, centered around Worlds Beyond Number, Critical Role. Come with any questions you have about those things or just about anything. Like I said, we usually end up just kind of talking with the chat and just hitting whatever comes up really. But it's been a lot of fun, and would love to see more of you guys there for that. And
It'd be good to get more Worlds Beyond chatter in that,
I
live stream.
I would love more Worlds Beyond people in the fold.
Yeah, I mean, we love Critical Role, but bro, every episode of Worlds Beyond, I love it more and more. There's just a lot I want to talk about, and I know you just said this, but like, really, we really want that live stream to be a time where we can just kind of get together and hang out and just talk nerd stuff, So like, it'd be great to have you guys join that live stream and just share your latest thoughts on the campaign, theories, comments, what have you. So
Yeah, absolutely. And on that same note, join the Discord. Like I said, we would love more Worlds Beyond, chatter. Lots of places, so including the Discord. There will be a link in the description below, as always. We got a channel there just for Worlds Beyond, and that's additionally where we kind of host all Pixelist stuff. So we also have Sunday Fun Day watch parties, where really we watch anything. So who knows what it could be on any given week. We've been watching Christmas movies recently, but we've been watching like D&D one shots. We've been watching Fantasy High, all sorts of things. So come hang out for that. And I do this every time. I always feel like there's like one more thing I'm trying to remember to mention, but I remembered. Cycling back to Worlds Beyond specifically, if you guys are familiar with us, we always give our recap before diving into the discussion. We are not feeling any type of way on this yet, but I just want to reach out and get y'all's opinion for those of you that do consume that recap and our discussion. If you enjoy the recap as it exists currently, being more of an in-depth kind of 15-ish minute, analysis of what happened, or if you would prefer a quicker recap, maybe somewhere in the realm of 5-ish to 10 maybe minutes, for just a quicker, like what happened in that episode? Let me catch up real quick. It's just
it's so hard
something we're thinking about.
We're just both of us such nerds, man. It's hard to not like, it's like, oh, that's so important, I gotta talk about it. But I think it's a fair question to ask. So
yeah, it's very infused in my DNA, like to explain something in my mind thoroughly. So like, even if y'all were like, yes, give us the 5-minute version, like I might not even be capable of that. But I'm just wanted to put the feelers out. Maybe you guys love the in-depth recaps. I mean, that is personally like my style. Like I like to know all the details if I need a refresher. But yeah, we're just curious. And for now it'll stay the same. But yeah.
And then one other like quick announcement is Will and I have been talking a lot about the channel in general and about having some more like OG D&D type of content on it, because we both love D&D. I mean, if you love Worlds Beyond, you probably like D&D. Maybe you may not have known that it was actually based on D&D actually. But if you'd like to see more D&D content, we both have been DMs. I'm about 2.5 years deep DMing a certain campaign. So any DM questions you might have or content you're looking for, or we've even thrown out the idea of like doing a one shot together. all of that stuff. The best place to chat about that would be in the Discord. And feel free to ping us there. So
boom, boom, boom. So I think that's it as far
I
as
think it's it.
our nonsense goes. So with that out of the way, we can actually dive in here. So we're going to be talking about Worlds Beyond Number episode 18, Say My Name. And like I mentioned, we will be given our recap before jumping into the full discussion, and we do cut that recap out and host it separately on YouTube for your viewing convenience. So if you find yourself on that recap and want to hear our full discussion, that'll also be linked down in the description. But without further ado, if you would like to kick us off, my friend.
Yeah, this was actually Between the Lines is what this one was called. Say My Name was the last. You blew it. Episode 18, Between the Lines. And I'll go and say we haven't talked about where to split this episode, by the way. Which might be an important detail. Maybe I'll take it up to when they're reading more information about the scroll stuff that had been handed off. That's around that point.
That's exactly where I had designated in my notes. Yeah.
So essentially the episode begins with Suvi, also known as Sky, essentially saying goodbye to Silver, who is being shipped out to Fort Kyrian, which has fallen. We found that information on the previous episode. We also find out that is where Archmage Saber is. Archmage Saber being one of the 5, I think, head archmages who has been missing the night before. Turns out Archmage Saber is out at where this issue has happened, and we find out also information around the details around how Fort Kyrian has fallen. That there was something around and you correct me if I'm wrong here, Will, but wild beasts that had taken it over. And then the forces of Gathmire had basically swooped in and taken over the area before the Citadel could sort of reclaim it. Is that correct, Will?
That's
correct understanding.
That was my understanding. And then like a red fleet was on the way as well, or something.
Yeah, right. And we also find out later in the episode that Steel has also shipped out, presumably to deal with this as well. Suvi offers to take Silver, to accompany Silver to the traveling door, where he is to teleport out. And it's also there at this sort of dock of portal doors that there is a number of Temuri and other soldiers. I mean, it's the heaviness is there of this is a serious encounter we're about to engage in. And the Temuri that are here are the best way to describe it would be they're a bit rougher around the edges than Mr. Callan that we saw previously. Now, if you've forgotten, the Temuri is essentially what we thought it was a cantrip personified. It's actually a cantrip or a spell personified. And these Temuri, first of all, they don't have names. And the implication is that they are heading to their deaths. And secondly, like I mentioned, they're much rough around the edges. I think Brennan describes some of them as red and fiery. And we come to find out that these are fireballs. And there was one other spell,
lightning bolts
that have been up level casted to a level 9 spell, which is the highest spell in D&D. And that these are those spells personified. That's what these Temuri are. The other thing that's mentioned is that these Temuri can actually do some lower level spells as well. But then once they are ready, they will essentially cast themselves and extinguish themselves in battle. But again, they don't have names because that is what is expected that's going to be happening. Suvi says her goodbyes. She has a small exchange with one of the Temuri that is essentially do your job, stay focused. But also it's kind of a little bit brisk between the two of them. And then essentially Suvi makes her way back to read up in the library to try to figure out whatever she can, whatever information she can because she's expected, I guess, in this case, to be spending the night with Silver. And I actually don't remember what she found in the library. Because there wasn't much information. And one detail we find out is that there's been sort of like a not industrial revolution, but like most of the stuff that's been written has been written like in the last 50 to 100 years.
Yeah.
So that was one detail. The next day, she meets back up with Ame and Ursulon and the fox. There's some great chatter around convincing the fox to learn how to read. And they ultimately decide, let's go to see Suvi's new place in the Tower of Silence, which she is the Archmage. She's the apprentice to the Archmage Silence. So they go to this beautiful 8-story tower. They meet Silence, and you're gonna have to help me here too. There's like this. Brennan describes it almost kind of like a ritualistic, like what you would see like in a cathedral, like for holy water. This sort of birdbath-esque basin, and I don't remember what they called it, if you recall, Will, but there was some disagreement on the pronunciation of it.
Are you referring to the Aerith Depository?
I am. Which is it, the Eris Depository or the Aerith?
I think it is Eris, and then Erika made like a Final Fantasy joke.
Yeah.
So it like stuck in my head. Well,
and
now
then she
actually
was
now I don't
like,
know which one it is.
And then she was like, explain it to the fox in case the fox doesn't know.
Yeah.
And Silence, essentially, and also Silence is accompanied by another apprentice, Yulia, who is very kind and giving of like authority to even Suvi. And it's like, if you need anything, just let me know. You get kind of the impression of like a fresh graduate student. And there is some lore that Brennan gives about like what house she comes from or like what school she's come from. And also notably that her aunt is Steel, though may not actually by blood. But essentially, this Aerith Depository is basically a basin where if you are, it's sort of like this neural network is the best way to describe it, where mages across the Imperium can use this to essentially soak up magical energy to continue to be active. And what's understood is that if you are a mage who has no need of your spell slots, that you sort of donate it into this Aerith Depository so that other, presumably wizards that are part of the war effort, can make use of it as they need to. We get a couple of insights about Suvi, how she soaked in it when she was 14 and nearly died, and also nearly got one of her friends, I think she said her best friend, killed. And then there's a funny dialogue around the fox keeps calling it juice, and Silence is like, please stop doing that. They leave. They decide to go see Suvi's sort of like where she's going to be staying. There's a bunch of like books being moved in, like her libraries are getting outfitted with all these cool things. And notably, they find this sort of like alchemist workstation where there are 3 vials that Brennan describes, essentially a blue one, a black one, and a red one. And just for brevity, we come to find out they do open the black one, and this impish demon comes out. And this is basically an ink demon. In fact, all 3 of them are ink demons. The blue one is Cyril, who is a poet. The black one is Enzo, who is a like historian writer, though everything he writes is wrong. Like all of his edits are incorrect. And the red one is Vandal, who I think Brennan talked about. Like once he becomes freed, he starts like just like graffitiing like penises, like just all over cursing. The Citadel. So anyway, they get to meet all 3 of them at different points. And they actually have them go bring them food. Actually, Enzo does get killed temporarily, but anyway, I'm like rambling. I'm getting like way in the weeds on this. So they do decide to, I think it's Ame who says, you know, hey, now that I've had my curse lifted, I want to go back to those documents that Steel, that Suvi was asked to bring to Grandmother Ren. And do you want to take it from there?
Yes, sir. I will do it. So yeah, so Ame gets out two things. It's the book called The Stars of the Southern Skies and a bunch of charts that depict like the shapeshifters. So she kind of spreads them out and is just seeing if they mean anything new to her now that she has her memories back. The first thing she notices is that she gets a smell that is the same smell that kind of came out when her curse was removed. Um, Again, the one, if you guys recall, is of Yorin. Smells
Hmm.
like him. So they're first looking at these diagrams, and they're very old. And Brennan describes it as kind of akin to like the classic like Da Vinci Anatomy of Man type of drawing. And Ursulon recognizes the creature that's being depicted as a Garen or Garin. I can't remember how it's pronounced. Which is an animal. Like it's a literal like type of creature
Hmm.
from the spirit realm. So this is like a specific animal that this shapeshifter is turning into rather than like a unique form of their own. And so Ursulon shares this information like, hey, that's a Garen that we're looking at. And they're described as like these massive hyenas, but they have opposable thumbs. So they're like kind of like
Terrifying.
dangerous apex predators because they have like all the
Yeah.
benefits of being like this wild beast, but also they have opposable thumbs, which means they can do all the things that like humans can do.
Right.
Um, so Ame is kind of just testing with her alchemical supplies if she can figure out like what's going on with this smell. And she does determine that it's been like intentionally added to this page, like this element of scent. Um, they then get to speaking on just like the essence of names, stemming from Garen, and they start thinking about the name Yorin. And Suvi kind of like has this moment where it clicks, where like something about Yoren's name informs what he is. And she realizes this is like some piece of the puzzle. Ursulon then inspects the scent itself to see if it is the same scent he remembers from these Garen creatures, but it's not. It is reminiscent of them, but there is like a very heavy iron scent that is added on it. And again, this is what Yorin smelled like. And Ame then asks Suvi, is like, hey, is what you remember of Yorin, did he have like iron? And Suvi's like, yeah, he had iron on his tusks. And apparently, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was an indication of like subjugation or like control or
Yeah,
something.
there was some comment immediately after that the use of iron allows you to basically like possess or like control or own spirits.
Mm.
Subjugate's about the best way you put it already. So
So
something like that.
yeah, so we don't really know like necessarily the implications of that, but Suvi did remember there was iron on his tusks, and there is no iron depicted on this diagram. Um, so then Ame takes a look at the Stars of the Southern Skies book, and it's basically just a basic to intermediary astronomy book on the southern hemisphere. There seems to be no connection to the shapeshifters or like the attack on Rue from the past. Like they can't figure out, like they just can't figure out what the connection is here or why this astronomy book is important. Um, so they decide, well, let's go ask Steele. Like she's the one that gave these to Suvi to give to Rin, so she can probably shed some light on this. So they head over to Steele's. They knock on the door, and they are greeted by Ishra, who is Steele's 15-year-old daughter with her second husband. She lets them know that, hey, Steele flew out on a skyship earlier, presumably to go help with the Fort Kyrian stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but Sonder is also there, who is Steele's husband. And we'll talk more about this in the episode. But interestingly, he knows Suvi's real name.
Hmm.
He
Yeah.
makes some jokes about it. So again, Steele's not there, so Suvi alone goes up to like Steele's office while the rest of the crew has like small talk with Sonder. And so in Steele's office, Suvi finds a journal that is marked on a certain page. So she opens that page up and finds a scrap piece of paper, which on that paper says all of our hearts XOXO, Chandri Newell, and Iman Cadbarakat. So these are Suvi's parents' real names. So Suvi takes the piece of paper, and then on that journal page, underneath it is a list of books that Steele had apparently requested to be brought to her. And as Suvi is like flipping through this list of books, she can piece together that it's all about the history of spirits that have been in the Citadel, whether captured or just in service. And Suvi notices like a couple things in this like kind of scrawled research. One is the word badger that is underlined, and then 2 pages prior to that, there's some stuff crossed out, but Steele wrote Hawthorne's Crest, Battle of Starling's Ford. And this we know, or Suvi recalls, that this was the battle that Sir Curran died in, that she researched earlier in the campaign. So Suvi gets this information, goes back downstairs, and the crew leaves to head back to Suvi's house. But on the way, she tells everybody what she found, and Ursulon's like, "Oh, like that's connected to me. Like Sir Curran is the guy that I met, and also my sister is a badger. So like I'm wondering, is this in reference to me?" And he tells Suvi and Ame about how Steele had offered to try and help him return to the spirit world. So they have a brief conversation about that. Ursulon, saying that at the time he didn't really want to talk about that with Steele, but this is clearly something they need to figure out. So they're heading back home. Suvi does make a quick stop at the Aerith depository and deposits the rest of her spell energy, and then they make their way home. In these final conversations in the episode, Ame brings up Pomeroy, Gult, and Sly, which are 3 names that she now remembered, that Grandmother Rin had told her about people at the Citadel that maybe like could help her. Suvi recognizes the name Pomeroy, she thinks, because she recalls there's this thing called the Kassoff Collection, which is essentially this collection that manages all the bound spirits within the Citadel. So if Pomeroy is a spirit working on that, it's kind of an interesting dynamic, because it's kind of like a spirit that might be like kind of holding down other spirits, sort of, in a way. Not necessarily, but so there's that. And then Gult, Suvi remembers, is a girl named Hana's father, which we find out Hana is the girl that almost drowned that Suvi referred to earlier this episode in Blake's part of the recap in the Eris depository. And then finally, Sly is, we've heard this name before because they are the head of the Office of Preemptory Catastrophic Deviation, which is essentially the office that is responsible for like enormous risks to the world, but risks that have like less than 1% of a chance of happening. So Suvi kind of described it as like the place old wizards go to like still think they're relevant, but maybe there's more than meets the eye here. So they kind of have that talk, and then everyone goes to sleep for the night, except Suvi doesn't actually go to sleep, and Ursulon doesn't really go to sleep either. So he sneaks off to go drink and just train and think to himself, while Suvi goes to research. And she basically, I think, is researching through like a lot of her parents' old things and their research. And as she's doing this, she makes an investigation check, but rolls poorly. But Brennan then reminds her, "You have a homunculus now, so you get to roll with advantage." And then she rolls really well. So he kind of poses the question to her, "So what are you specifically looking for?" And she says, like, "I'm just trying to figure out, like, between my parents, like, who was in the bigger rush for their studies, and like why were they studying that thing." And basically Brennan describes that she finds a message in this research, a message of dismissal from the Citadel about her mom, basically saying that her mom was being kicked out of the Citadel, but it was rescinded. But before it was rescinded, she was getting kicked out because she had apparently gotten into a tiff with one of her teachers and accused one of her teachers of treason, treason against magic itself. And that line is like kind of the cliffhanger we're left with. And that's where the episode ends. Again, episode 18, Between the Lines. Not Say My Name. But yeah, so again, y'all, if you're just on the recap, don't forget you can find our full discussion linked in the description below.
What a crazy episode, dude. It's crazy how much happens in like this 2-hour block.
Yeah, we've been, especially in like this last, there was such a long break, I'm having a hard time remembering, but I want to say like the last 3 or 4 episodes, there's just been so much lore ever since getting back to the Citadel that it really does feel like the amount of information coming in is far more than the runtime.
Yeah. I mean, and I think also the fact that some of the like filler stuff gets cut out in the editing, like in the post processing, that
Yeah,
it's actually like the runtime's a little deceitful
that's
because it's
true.
not like pure, it's not like an actual like authentic 2 hours. It's 2 hours post edited. So we're probably actually getting like 2.5 hours of content and something like that.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Yeah, maybe even longer, honestly, depending on how much, you know, kerfuffle is happening between roles and deciding what to do and yada yada yada. I never thought about that.
We got some really, I love the episode. We got some fun lore. You know, I think Brennan is just really having fun world building. I love the ink demons.
Yes, they're
And
so
then being
great.
just so, and Brennan's a little bit of a, you know, a little quick on the, you know, dropping beats, man. I mean,
Those poems.
yeah, he had the poems ready to go.
Yeah, that was impressive. I at first, and I was wondering if any of those were pre-written, because at least one of the first ones or something, it would have made sense that, knowing that was coming. But then as the episode went on, clearly some of them were not. They couldn't have been
Yeah.
pre-planned. So that was very impressive. Um, and I love Cyril already, man. And it just while we're here, an episode, maybe 2 episodes ago, we were talking about familiars, because Suvi wanted one. Maybe it was in a fireside chat where she was talking about like she wanted to take that spell. Seemingly this is that, right? Is that the impression you got? Like Cyril
I
is
didn't,
going to be her familiar?
I could see, I didn't put it together, but I could totally see that.
I'm interested in the mechanics of it. Like, is this like all three are technically her familiar, or like just because like we're at home base right now, there was access to just
Mm-hmm.
the three of them. But yeah, I did think it was the familiar just because of that earlier conversation that I just alluded to, but also when Ursulon killed Enzo, Brennan was like, "Oh yeah, you can bring him back with 10 gold, which is like the same
Mm-hmm.
materials that you
Yeah.
need for find familiar." And then of course the end where he used the word homunculus, but was like, "Now you have a homunculus, you get advantage on this." So like it also felt like a familiar
Mm-hmm.
type of mechanic.
Yeah, and I'm curious the actual definition. Homunculus servant for 5e.
Oh, is that like an entirely different spell?
Well, I mean, it's like, I mean, it is a spell, but I was curious if they were one and the same. Let's see, tiny construct. So maybe a little bit of flavor there. I don't know.
What is it? What does it do?
Um, it. Let's see. It can do a ranged weapon attack. So it would presumably go after you, and then it can use a reaction to cast a spell you have that has a range of touch
Mm,
within 120 feet of it,
okay.
which was the same thing that Emily Axford had with her Raven
Oh, mother.
mother. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I guess it's probably some kind of combination of this spell and
right,
familiar. Which that's cool because it definitely feels distinctly different from the fox. Which obviously the fox is different from a normal 5e familiar to begin with, but
right.
um, I it, I mean, I have no doubt in Brennan whatsoever. But if this is like a familiar that's with her for the most of the campaign, he's gonna be having to bust out a lot of these poems. You know, it's a tall order.
Yeah, I
But maybe,
mean,
but I mean, we don't. It's too early to really know exactly what's happening here. Maybe these things are only going to be at her tower in the Citadel.
mhm.
But I hope
and,
not because I love them already.
and Suvi is 20, right? We got a age for her from Brennan? Didn't you say 20?
I don't remember, but that sounds right.
And her issue with the Aerith repository or depository, she was 14, I think.
Okay.
So
I missed that.
only 6 years prior for that. But the point I was getting at was that was another interesting lore piece that we got. And I'm wondering what all gets discussed, because there's like little details where Brennan's like, and you know this, and it seems like, the players themselves pick up on it really quickly and share their own details about it. And so,
yeah, me too. I was also wondering that because at first I almost wondered if that story about the kid drowning was like an improv. Like, oh yeah, when I was little, this happened with this thing. But then later, it was like backstory about that because the girl, I can't remember the context, even though I just was talking about it. But Hana, I think, was her father, or Sly maybe is her father, or no, Gult, I think is her father. So when that was dropped, I was like, oh, I guess that wasn't an improv little thing. That's like a concrete part of her backstory, which is really interesting. Which the whole Aerith depository thing is really cool. We kind of knew this existed, not in name, but because of the rings. Like we've seen mention of those that like give the mages extra spell slots. So I'm assuming that is the mechanic here. Like there's the depository, and then these rings are what like connects wizards to it.
Well, and Silence was even mention of having that ring on too, so that makes sense, actually.
Which, this is small, but there was the whole mention of like you use your own spell slots, and then like in times of need you can then access that. Like
I think it was even like it's not even just frowned upon, like it's kind of not a sin, but like it's just like not cool to use it if you have your own spell slot still.
Right. Which what I thought was interesting is then when Silence exits the scene, it's described that his ring is what cast Dimension Door. So it's like, unless he was coincidentally out of his own spell slots, but I doubt it. It's just kind of like, this is the rule for you guys, but me, haven't used my own spell slot in millennia.
Yeah, and to be fair, that's pretty on brand for Brennan. I mean, Brennan's, Brennan always has like the throughput line of, corrupt officials at the top, or like, the elite, the corrupt elite. So, I mean, I could totally see that being a thing of like, sort of like the self-serving, person at the very top who's just like, yeah, like, why should I use one of my own spells, and just soaks up the perks of it for sure.
Yeah. I'm assuming that was an intentional detail from Brennan. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but if it was, I really like that kind of subtle, little subtle thing. I know I'm kind of like slightly bouncing around here, but they all connect. I also thought it was cool that like Silence's tower was like the biggest one in the place, and it's cool that seemingly Suvi just gets that when he dies as his apprentice. Now is that something we'll actually see in this campaign? Like maybe, but the campaign's not going to become tower generator decorator, but it just was a cool thought that that could be hers one day.
She's got a cushy job, dude. Brennan was saying, you have 1 hour a day to like do stuff Silver wants you to do, or not Silver, Silence wants you to do, but otherwise, like, the understanding is like you're, in charge of your own destiny, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
that was cool. It reminded me of like, I can't think of the name of it, but like there's some other like, and this is very generic. It's probably from a million things, but there's some other specific like IP I'm thinking of where like you get to like this elite role, and then it's like it's up to you. Like I think it's like a dang it, this is terrible. I'm ruining this because I can't think of what it is. But like you become like, I think it's a video game. You become like an elite agent, and then you decide what you want to do. Anyways, reminded me of that.
Okay.
Good share.
Yeah, it's not ringing any bells for me, but
yeah, I thought that was cool. All right, let me pull up my notes here. Oh, one thing I did want to talk about was the Tamori. Um,
That was
one,
crazy.
yeah, one just really cool. I also liked that um Suvi had never seen these before. So this is kind of like the evolution of like what the Citadel is like getting into, you know? Which I think you mentioned it in your recap about like just in the grand scope of history of this world, like only like the last 100 years has magic like just like industrial revolution of magic is like
Right.
ongoing right now. So I like that this is kind of representative of that because when Suvi was a kid, like the cantrip Tamori were a thing, and then like we're already at ninth level spell versions.
Yeah.
Um, but also just like such a cool like informative piece on like the political landscape here, like because they are just cannon fodder. Like these things are just like
Hmm.
to die. Like they're not given a name because of it. Really quite sad because like they do have consciousness and they do have like autonomy on some level. But
And
they're just
I think they were even self-aware as to why they
yeah,
didn't have
that's a good way
names
to put it. Yeah.
too.
They do seem self-aware. So it's like created just to die. Um and another one of those nice little details, like what's the bakery guy's name?
Callan, Mr. Callan.
Mr. Callum, he there was the whole point about like they do have the distinguishing mustaches or whatever, but for these soldiers that are bred to die, like there's no distinguishing between them. They all besides like
Right.
the lightning bolt ones and the firebolt ones, they all look the same.
Right.
Um and correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there some mention of like the fact that they didn't have names? There was like something wrong with that in Suvi's mind, like that was like a cardinal sin or something.
I don't remember.
Cardinal sin is a bit extreme, but there was
Yeah,
like
no. Um, I don't remember that specific detail. I just remember her being a bit put off by the implication of like what I took it to mean was like the implication of like the scope of conflict that um these people are heading off into, but more specifically Silver, what Silver's heading off into. And her being kind of shook by that, but maybe, I don't know. I might have missed it.
I need to re-listen to it because it wasn't as extreme as cardinal sin, like I just said, but I feel like there was some
Mm.
mention of like this like goes against the lingua arcana and like the magic. Like
I
things
do
are
remember
supposed to
something.
have names. Like
Yeah, I do remember something like that.
yeah, and
Yeah,
clearly a whole theme of this entire campaign is like the meaning and the
names.
power
Yeah.
in names. But I think it's a nice actually comparison to the last episode with I can't remember the witch's name, but the one that tried to contact Ame, how her familiars didn't have names and clearly they were just like these mindless drones that were like slaves in a way.
Hmm.
So, like similarly here, like these things sadly they're not mindless, but they are treated in the same way as just like disposable um entities. Um which is just sad. Especially with how much character at least the one we saw talk to Suvi seemed to have. You know,
Hmm.
it's definitely not just a robot. Um, what's also interesting is that they're ninth level. Like that's extremely powerful. So like in a world where you're capable of creating those things, like why even are you still sending people like Silver and you know real people, if you will? And I guess it all it just speaks to the gravity of like what's happening here.
Well,
Which,
yeah. I mean, if Suvi's level 2 as the Archmage Apprentice,
yeah,
and there's like level 9 spells being casted, I'm like, not just a power gap, but I mean, like I said, the scope of the conflict's pretty crazy when you think about it.
yeah. I mean, because I mean, I guess we have no way of knowing. Silver could be level 20 for all we know, but I just assumed he was like similarly low level like Suvi, but maybe he's not. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm just obviously we're in a campaign, we're in a world where it's just kind of like ready to boil over between these conflicts that we know are going on, but like this attack seemingly came out of nowhere, according to like the war had kind of been at a standstill.
Yeah, like a
Um,
lull, I guess what it's
yeah,
described as.
and so like this feels very like heavily escalated really quickly. But I guess I have no perspective for that. Like maybe they would send ninth level spells to even the smallest skirmish. But
I mean, if Archmage Saber's there
yeah,
and
Steel got sent
Steel
out.
is on the way or tangentially related,
I wonder
seems
what
like a big deal.
the importance of this fort is. We found out that it's
Mhm.
to the north. I think that's like the only
Mhm.
context we got. And I'm honestly not familiar enough with like the world map still to know like any
Yeah.
implications of that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
guess
I
so.
wonder if there is a map yet. It's
I
like a
know
fan
there.
put together.
I don't know if there's one that's put out, at least not officially. There might be some like fan ones. They did say that's something they will put out eventually, but I'm sure at this point, you know, Brennan's still filling it in
Mhm.
on some level. Which I mean, all DMs, will continuously add stuff,
Mhm.
but it might be a while before they want to like officially push anything out.
Yeah.
But or if you're about to say something, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say we had about 15 minutes if we wanted to keep the conversation going. Um,
No.
yeah, I think you're right. I don't think there's a map that anyone's put together yet.
So we know that this thing was taken. It's a big deal because the Archmage is out, Steel is out, ninth level spells are out. It was taken over by beasts, and then Gauthmai people went in. But the implication to me
Yeah.
there is it was taken over by shapeshifters, not like.
Oh, okay. That does make more sense.
I
But isn't
mean,
there like a weird? Didn't we find out there's like a weird energy around like how Gauthmai like see their shapeshifters?
yeah, we did. We did find that out. I'm not gonna be able to like regurgitate it here properly, but there was something to the effect of like in the histories, like they were not treated well. Because I remember
Yeah.
in that episode we were talking about like, did that have something to do with like why Yoren defected? Was working with Citadel people. But yeah, there was something to that effect. But so yeah, that was my understanding was that the beasts were shapeshifters.
Okay, that went right
Which
over my head.
well,
Okay.
it wasn't spelled out that way. That's just like my guess, but it would draw a through
Well,
line to like
it makes more sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Otherwise, I was like, that's random.
which
So
this and it also feels like, well, I guess I don't know. Because there's spirits in the world, obviously, and that's like a whole homebrew kind of thing. But I'm curious if at least some of these shapeshifters are just like what druids are known as in this world.
mhm.
Because
Yeah.
previously I was assuming the shapeshifters were like Yoren, and I just assumed Yoren was some sort of like spirit or some sort of weird something. But with the way Ursulon was like that Garen, that's like a beast. So to me, it was like, oh, so like a wild, like the shapeshifter is like a druid that wild shaped into this specific animal, as opposed to like, again, like a unique metamorphosis for.
Yeah, I went from that first ep being or children's story intro being like, oh, he's a druid to then being like, oh, he's something special. 'Cause the way Brennan described the beast was something I didn't recognize. To now back thinking like these are like D&D druids and Yoren, and we had a few different options put out there, but like Yoren either met one and can now, which is this is how it works in D&D, is once you interact, you see that creature, you can then wild shape into
Right.
it as long as it is appropriate challenge rating. So Yoren presumably saw one. There seems to be a slight implication that maybe he is subjugating spirits in some way. So that could have been one, or that he himself is a waylaid spirit, I think is what
Yeah.
Ursula threw out there, and maybe has a heritage to these Garen or
Yeah.
Garans. So
Yeah. I'm very curious what's going on with Yorin. It's something you and I have discussed at length in a number of episodes now about like who's really the bad guy here, like what's going on, like because on some level the scent feels like a red herring, like too obvious, like oh, it smelled like Yorin when we sounds so close to urine that makes me laugh every time I say it, but it smells like urine when the curse was removed, and so like he's the bad guy. He did it. Um I don't
For
know.
me, it put me more on the steel track.
Yeah,
You know, like
it feels too clean for like it, not that he's secretly the good guy or anything, but
mhm.
I just want to know more about this.
Because the party notably they get to this point of like, shouldn't we just ask Steel like why she has take these things? And like I think it's interesting. My theory, continuing on this theory we've had for a while about, what's the deal with Steel? Um
That's a t-shirt right there.
my theory is if Steel, maybe not like the big bad, but like as a morally gray decision, decided to curse Grandmother Rin and Ame, which that's been another question is like, well, when did this curse happen? Maybe we witnessed the curse happen. Maybe Suvi bringing these documents into the home is like what caused the curse to happen, caused the
Whoa.
spell to happen. And there's also Brennan seems to like appreciate like the old school style of like the man in black had to be invited in, which is similar to
Mm,
like the vampires. What if in the same way, like, hey, I'm handing this curse over to someone who's unknowingly going to be welcomed into the home and thereby like allowing the curse to be cast. I don't know. I just part of me just wonders like is that what happened here? Like, and then is it not necessarily a red herring, but is it like a
yeah.
shifting blame onto Yoren? I mean,
Yeah.
I
I
don't know.
mean, I'm with you in the suspicions on Steel and just thinking the Yorn stuff is too clean. I need to sit on it more, but I don't think the Suvi was the beginning of the curse. Um 'Cause I don't remember why in this moment, but I feel like there was like signs of it before she got there that like something was up, but maybe not.
There might have been. I don't
Um,
know.
but yeah, I mean, Yorn is just, and this really just dates back to like narrative tropes, but it just feels like there's more to Yorn that's going to be found out. And so whether Steel has anything to do with it or not, I just don't think Yorn is this pure bad guy that has set all this up. And he still might be bad and might be a bad guy, but I just think there's more, and especially given this whole iron element and subject. Like, and if he is a spirit that's been subjugated, that just plays so nicely into like the whole main theme of this campaign. It feels like of like wizards versus spirits. So that would make like a really interesting kind of like turn
Mhm.
of the plot to be like, no, Yorin is kind of like maybe the guy that was ultimately going to be in tune with what this party's in tune with. I still think there's a lot of like narrative growth to happen in that regard because Suvi is still very clearly like Team Citadel right now. Um, but yeah, I I thought
Well,
it was not convenient, but when they went to go see Steel, I knew she wasn't going to be there.
right.
Like that
Yeah.
answer would have been too easy to just get
Yeah.
right then.
Mhm.
Um, do you have any? I really don't. But are there any guesses on your part about what this star book has to do with anything at this point?
Ame had to do a roll like way earlier in the campaign, and like it was a low roll. So like I'm just like, there's got to be something there that they still are missing that like Brennan knows they're missing in some way.
My only guess, and it's not that like this is the key that puts it all together, but there was mention in the lore drops about these. I can't remember the wordage she used, but the ley lines of this world, essentially, like the celestial alignments. So I'm wondering if perhaps this star book is in some way in relation to that. Like, again, for my critical role people, something about like the magical ley lines of this world and how like when the stars
Mm.
are in this position, this magic is now able to be utilized, and like that's the connection or something.
Mhm. And it could be Steele doesn't even know. Like it could be
Yeah.
that Grandmother Rim was like, "Yeah, bring me the scroll that smells like urine, and I'll look at it. But also, I need this from you." And
Mm.
maybe it was related to this event, whatever's happening in like the witches coven thing that they're like
Yeah. Something's
We got to
going
do
on.
something. Yeah. I do like what you said about it being linked to something happening like on a celestial level or like with the spirit realm and ley lines or what have you.
It seems to like at least make sense because that would be like a world altering thing that would get all these people making
Mhm.
moves. Again, not to, I know probably everybody that listens to this definitely doesn't necessarily listen to Critical Role, but kind of feels like a solstice type of event that maybe happens every once in a while. Um, for sure. I know, or go ahead if you're.
Yeah. I
Oh,
just want to hit a couple of things too before
yeah,
I think you're about to say, I know we're coming to the end.
yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. Go ahead, go ahead.
Well, the other thing with Steele that I thought was interesting, it's so funny. Everything I get from her, I'm so untrustworthy, but I even almost wondered if like the notebook was left for Suvi to find.
It was interesting that the names were just that. I mean, it was in her own house, in her office, so it's not
'Cause
like
here's what I was
anybody could go in
thinking.
there.
Here's what I was thinking. We know through Suvi's name cloak ceremony that like all mentions get like erased entirely and like recovered, like changed. So like, is it really that simple that someone could like just write it down and anybody can read it?
Well,
Or
here's
is it that her parents are dead and so like maybe the spell is broken and now any like future recordings are fair game? I don't know.
well, it was that is like I that theory makes sense, but it wasn't a future writing because it was from her mom, right? Because it said like "Love you always, XOXO." Like, so it wasn't
Oh.
Steele that wrote that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I thought Steele was like writing like a this was over my head. I thought Steele was writing like a "You're dead, but I miss you guys," you know, and then like wrote their names at
I
the
mean, I
bottom of
guess
it.
it could
But
be.
that's why I was so suspicious because I was like, she just wrote their names at the bottom, like "Miss
Yeah.
you guys." And by the way, your full real name, in case anyone would want to know, is that's why I was suspicious. I was
Yeah.
like, this is so clunky. Okay, that's more interesting though. That
Well,
I'm a little less suspicious than in that way.
but you could be right. I mean, that the way I described it is how I understood it, but I mean, I guess there's no confirmation that that is what's going on. It could be what you're saying too, that she just wrote it because from when Suvi gave her name, we had the explicit mention of like going to Ame, going to Ursulon, and I think like writing down or making them write down. But then I thought even that thing disappeared, but like she still had like the ceremony of giving the name in that way was required. But then I
Mhm.
thought that like got vanished, but maybe it didn't. And maybe this piece of paper is that for Suvi's parents. Like maybe that's what they gave her or something.
Oh, okay. I guess that would solve the plot hole for me. If this is that thing, then
Yeah.
maybe.
I mean, that would make
Otherwise,
sense, but I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
What
Otherwise, it's a bit curious for sure.
But again, what I was going to say though is it did feel like for something that important, and maybe they are dead, so I guess it's not that important anymore that their names like be hidden. But it felt very easily just out there, you know. Like, and again, it's in her house, in her office. Like, who's going to come in there that is not welcome? But I just
Yeah.
would expect that to be like locked away. But maybe it's because like this, like she was intentionally gonna show that to Suvi tonight, but then maybe this thing happened and she kind of had to get out of there in a hurry or something.
Man,
Um,
I wish we had more time too, because I actually have a lot that I wanted to unpack here. I'm very curious if Brennan was just like normalizing Steele by being like, yeah, this is her second husband, because some people have their second husband, or
mhm.
if there was like a subtle implication, like what happened to the first husband, which I think might be the latter or the former. There, excuse me.
Yeah.
But then the other thing I was thinking about too was her research later on her mother
The
being on the
dismissal.
brink, yeah, of being dismissed. And for me, it brought me back to our theory when we talked about like what led to their demise, how they were double agents working for the Citadel. Like, well,
Mhm.
what if they themselves realized, and just to repeat this for the sake of our listeners, they themselves realized that like, no, the Citadel are the bad ones, and
Like a
Steel,
triple cross.
exactly, and Steel was like, well, no, like this is my home, like I can't. It's got to
Yeah.
be either them, it's either the Citadel or you guys have to go. Like I don't have a choice. So for me, it gave more credence to that of like it. this what was originally presented as like we're fighting against traitors to the Citadel, it made it a little bit murkier, I guess.
Yeah. I'm 100% with you on all of that. But at least in the specific instance of this dismissal, this would have been far before any of that, right? Because it was before she even
True.
got her name
True.
cloak. But it still could obviously have links and implication, like who was this teacher that she accused of being a traitor. I have like two things I want to touch on. But one last thought on this thing is I was also wondering, could this be fabricated, not in the sense that it's fake, but that it was intentional, because we know that they were spies, they were double agents. So perhaps Suvi's mom having this on her record, like, oh, she almost got kicked out of the Citadel. That could maybe be an in for like Gaufmeyer, whoever it was, being like, yeah, I'm beefing with the Citadel. Like, you can trust me. So like, could it have even been
a lot smarter?
Like intent, like, you know,
Uh-huh.
but it could have been a real thing that she just then utilized in that way, or it could have been completely, you know, CIA setup. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts if you have any on that. But then the two other small things I wanted to talk on. One is Sonder. Do you know that word? It's like one of my favorite words.
There's like a song or like a movie or something that uses it.
It essentially means like, it's like the realization that like everyone you see in your life is living like their own full life.
Yeah, it's from a comedian on YouTube who has a bit about it, now that I'm remembering it.
So that's just like it's like a really deep kind of word. So it makes me like wonder like about her husband, and maybe it's like maybe there's like nothing really to unpack there, because it is kind of funny that he like loves tea and yoga. Like maybe he's just a very like deep individual, so like the name kind of fits. So I liked that, but I'm interested to see like more to that character, if it's beyond just like stepdad. But then secondly, I thought it was really interesting that he knew Suvi's name.
Yes,
because in our episode where the name thing happened, I remember somebody you and I were talking, and we were like, because we got the explicit scene of Suvi giving Ursulon and Ame her name, and there was not a scene of her giving Steele her name. But I think you and I were like, but she probably did. You know, that was just off screen. But I remember somebody in the comments was saying like, no, she didn't, because we would have seen that. So I was like, yeah, you might be right. So maybe she didn't give Steele her name. But now Sonder knows her name.
I will say though, some people were so deliberate about like, well, it's not that. And you're like, but it could be. Yeah. This felt a little bit to me, and I don't know if this was the case. It felt a little bit to me, Brennan as the DM being helpful in like helping characterize the relationship. And
like you can trust this guy, kind of.
Yeah, like if I'm a player meeting someone from like my backstory, or like that I should know but isn't like a deliberate character, I may not know like how to interact with them. And what a good DM's going to do is like, hey, and you guys would be best friends.
Yeah.
Like in some way to like to show the familiarity there. So I kind of felt like that's what Brennan was doing, and like kind of tipping the hand to be like, y'all really close. But if it's not that, then yeah, it's I mean, Suvi also wasn't thrown by it that he knew it. So
yeah, I fully agree with that assessment you just made on like the DM kind of helping the player out in that way. But I will say, I think there were other ways to do that if that's all he was doing. Like, I don't think he would just use Suvi's name lightly in that way, you know? So I think that is what he was doing, but I think we can still draw a deeper meaning from it as well. Which was just interesting to me, because like, one, we weren't even sure if Steele had it, even though we were pretty sure she had it. But this is like a whole nother level, because again, not that there's anything wrong with like a second marriage in your life, like, you know, but it's not even like her first husband that Suvi might have known as a kid, you know, like, because we know that her mom and Steele were best friends. So it's not like this guy was also in the picture that was like a really close family friend. Like, this is the second husband. So he definitely came in later in life, and yet he still is like in enough to know her name. I just thought that was not that there's like something sinister or anything like that going on. I just thought it was very
Mm,
interesting inclusion.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So again, would
Well,
love to hear y'all's thoughts on this.
we're unfortunately out of time. I gave Will a hard stop on tonight, and of course he and I rambled before hitting record. So yeah, definitely let us know in the Discord, and then definitely like in our Pixel Bits live stream channel. Let us know your thoughts, reactions, and theories, and we'll be sure to talk about it on this Friday's live stream.
Yeah.
But all that to say, I really enjoyed the episode, man. I had a great time watching it or listening to it.
Yeah, me too. And again, sorry y'all for getting this out so late. Excuse me. We do have a new episode tomorrow. I don't know. We still have a lot going on, so I can't like promise when our episode on tomorrow's episode will come out, but hopefully in a slightly more timely manner than this one. But yeah, hopefully hopefully tomorrow doesn't just wash away all the speculation we just talked about, and we can hear from you guys in the comments and hear your thoughts. Because I'm really interested. But yeah, anything else?
I think that's it.
Alrighty, y'all. Again, we got a Discord linked in the description. Come hang out with us there. Like Blake said, we got a live stream on Friday afternoons, and pretty much every Sunday night we have a watch party of some sort. So come join us for that. But until
Alrighty.
next time, my friends, we'll see you later.
See ya.